My name is Thomas Gaetkens, and I'm the director of the Getty Research Institute. And it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the third session of this wonderful symposium, Urban Ambition: Assessing the Evolution of Los Angeles. The character of this event will change tonight, and after listening to scholarly talks this morning and impressive conversations about important projects accomplished in Los Angeles in the last decades this afternoon, now we will witness some personal experiences from prominent professionals in architecture and related fields. We are looking forward to learning why they came to work in Los Angeles, and we hope that they say and they share with us what kind of opportunities this great city has offered them, which enhanced their professional practice and architectural vision. Many of us have come from elsewhere, but have learned to enjoy living in the city. We have discovered its dynamism, its huge potential of continuous change. However, before I give the podium to Wim de Wit, who will introduce tonight's participants, I would like to say a few words about the Getty Research Institute's interest in the history of architecture and design. I assume that you all had the opportunity to see the Overdrive exhibition. The number of GRI-owned objects in this show tells you that we have been collecting architectural archives for quite some time. In fact, from the moment the Getty Research Institute was founded in the early 1980s, following the engagement and vision of Kurt Forster, we acquired architectural materials starting with the library and archive with the foundational architectural historian Nicholas Pevsner. We have acquired archives of many internationally famous architects like Aldo Rossi, Daniel Libeskind, and drawings of such California architectural visionaries like Pierre Koenig and John Lautner, and of course the archive and architecture photographer Julius Schulman, who put California's modernism on the map, and of course Rainer Benham, whom we understand much better after the lectures this morning. Over the years, we have built up a substantial body of material documenting the history of architecture from antiquity until present times, and especially documents of the oeuvre of many architecture and design professionals across Europe and North America, not just California, from the 20th century. We have recently been honored by the recent donation of the archive of the extraordinary and unforgettable architectural critic, Ada Louise Huxtable, which will join that of other critics, such as Herbert Muschamp and the aforementioned Rainer Benham. With those archives, we demonstrate that we look at all aspects of the architectural field, not only its design and planning, but also its critical reception, as well as the efforts to preserve buildings, an effort which we share with our colleagues of the Getty Conservation Institute and the Getty Foundation. In addition to making these collections accessible to researchers, we also use them for our own research projects, resulting in the organization of exhibitions such as Shaping the Great City, Modern Architecture in Central Europe, 1890 to 1937. This was in 2001. The Schulman exhibitions we mounted in 2005 and 2007. The exhibition devoted to the work of Bernard Rudowski, shown in 2008, and of course now Overdrive. We are committed, and I will state it here, to continue to work along these lines and to collect and provide access to materials that will assist readers and researchers in learning about the history of the architectural profession, the critical traditions of the discipline, architectural form, and the built environment. The Overdrive exhibition, which is part of the larger PST Presents initiative, supported by our colleagues of the Getty Foundation, is in some way the peak of all these efforts to collect, to catalog, to make publicly accessible, and to scholarly investigate the history of California's modern architecture. All this would not have been possible without the intense and unrelenting efforts and professionalism of my colleagues Rani Singh and Chris Alexander. However, we all have to thank Wim de Wit, who is the mastermind behind this enormous effort, including the exhibition and this symposium, and who should be congratulated by all of us with our warm applause when I turn over the podium to him to introduce the participants of the panel tonight. Please join me in welcoming Wim de Wit.
Well, thank you very much, Thomas, for that very nice introduction and for your words about our architectural collections. And yes, we will continue to collect in many more different ways. And it's great to know that these efforts have the support of the director and of the Getty Trust as a whole. We've had a very interesting day so far. This morning we had an historic looking backwards and looking forwards. And one of the things we learned throughout that conversation, that there has always been a duality between boosterism on the one hand, boosterism of the greatness of LA, and a certain kind of contempt for the city on the other hand, which really carried after Christopher Hawthorne's and Anthony Vidler's lectures carried on very nicely in the conversation that we had when also Mia Lehrer joined us, and she was like the real boosterist, whereas Tony and Christopher tried to be more realists, I would say. But it was really great to also that it worked so well. In the afternoon, we had a wonderful conversation between two representatives of firms that in the 1950s and 60s really made the most important architecture in this city, the firm of Welton Beckett and Associates and A.C. Martin and Associates. And then that was followed by a conversation in which we learned about the ideal collaboration between the great clients and the great architects. The clients being Frederick and Laurie Semitar-Smith of the developments in Culver City, and Eric Owen Moss talking about his work with them, which was also very eye-opening, and I think so far it has been a very stimulating day. And we are now going to continue, as Thomas already said, and talk to a number of practitioners who came from other places to LA, and what was it with LA? Why did they stay? So we're looking at the city of LA itself, not so much at its individual buildings, but at the city as a whole, and at what it represents or represented to a number of architects and professionals in related fields, who came here in the second half of the 20th century and thereafter. Over the years, Los Angeles has attracted designers from all parts of the world, many of whom decided to make this city their home. The city seems to have been especially appealing to architects from Central Europe. In addition to the well-known ones, Rudolf Schindler and Richard Neutra, I should mention such architects as Victor Gruen, Mark Mack, and Wolf Prix of Coop Himmelblau, and even that tradition continues in the real very young firms. The firm that continues the Coop Himmelblau office here in Los Angeles are also two young Austrian architects. All of them must have felt that Los Angeles had something to offer that they were unable to get elsewhere, and they were not the only ones. This morning we saw already that British architectural historian and critic Rayner Banham loved Los Angeles. While he did not make LA into his permanent home, this writer and filmmaker, as we heard in both Christopher Hawthorne's and Tony Vidler's talks, did probably more than anyone else to make people outside Los Angeles take notice of our city. And that was a huge achievement, for the standard response in the 1970s, 80s, and 90s was that Los Angeles was a city that one was supposed to hate, the people on the contempt side. This attitude has still not yet entirely disappeared, But to a large part of the population, Los Angeles is now a really cool place. Tonight we will hear from 4 panelists who either settled here or worked here for a very long time. 3 of the 4 are already here. We are still waiting for number 4, but we know he will be here. During our conversation, I will ask them such questions as, why did they come to Los Angeles? What did they find in our city, architecturally and culturally? And what was positive and problematic in comparison to what they knew in their old environment? I think that in the end, a more nuanced image will present itself of our city. I'm not going to predict right at this point. Well, there's speaker number 4. I'm not going to predict what the speakers are going to say and will therefore not describe what this image will be exactly. But I do think that by the end of the evening, we will understand much better what it's like to work as an architect in our city. Okay, we're all hooked up and you can understand us. So let me start with the introductions, and I'm going from your left to right. And I'll start with Craig Hodgetts, who has been in LA the longest of all of us. I think so. He was trained in automotive design, theater, and architecture, but Craig was, together with Robert Mangurian, partner in the firm Studio Works from 1969 to 1984, when he founded a new firm with his wife, Chin Min Fung, who is also here. Thank you. Yeah. Over the years, Craig and Ming developed a huge oeuvre, but I will mention just a few of their many projects. The renovation of the Egyptian Theater, the renovation of the Hollywood Bowl, and of course, last year's installation of the California Design Exhibition at LACMA. Then, next to Craig is Peter Noever, is a designer and curator of art, architecture, and media. He's the director emeritus of the Museum für Angewandte Kunst in Vienna, better known as the MAC, where he was the artistic director and CEO between 1986 and 2011. During that time, in 1994 to be precise, he founded the MAC Center for Art and Architecture, which is housed in 3 Schindler buildings: Schindler's own house in West Hollywood, the Mackey Apartments, and the Fitzpatrick House. Peter was responsible for numerous exhibitions, too many to mention them all, except for one that I want to mention here, Bernard Rudowski's Sparta Sybaris, which was an exhibition that, when we did our Rudowski exhibition 5-6 years ago, was incredibly important to us. And the list of books in which Peter was involved is probably even longer, but I want to mention only a series of 3 books that I have used very often. Architecture in Transition, The End of Architecture, and Visionary Clients for New Architecture, which I think are all based on similar conversations as what we have here tonight. Then we'll go to Hitoshi Abe, is an architect who was born in Sendai, Japan. He received his architectural training at SCI-Arc and worked for the Co-op Himmelblau office here in Los Angeles between 1988 and 1992. In that year, having won the competition for the Miyagi Stadium in Rifu, Miyagi Prefecture, Abe decided to establish his own office, Atelier Hitoshi Abe, which built a number of award-winning projects. Abe returned to Los Angeles in 2007 to become the chair and professor of the Department of Architecture and Urban Design in the School of Arts and Architecture at UCLA. He's also the Paul I. and Hisako Terasaki Chair in the Study of Contemporary Japan and Director of UCLA's Terasaki Center for Japanese Studies. And
too long.
And then our last participant is Neil Denari. He received his architectural training at the University of Houston and at Harvard. He worked in New York from 1983 to 88 when he came to Los Angeles to establish his firm Neil M. Denari Architects. Neil has designed many award-winning projects, including LA iWorks and the Endeavor Talent Agency, and of course his HL23 building right next to the High Line in New York, a very prominent building. So these are our speakers with whom I will have the conversation. And we're first going to start with a question that I'm going to ask to all 4 speakers about why they came to Los Angeles, when, and what made you decide to stay here in this city? In other words, how did the city of Los Angeles influence your architectural career? And so we start with Craig.
And do we sit here?
You can sit here, you can see the images there, and the audience sees it in back of us.
They know how to set things up. Well, you know, for me, firstly, it's a great opportunity to have the opportunity to think about why I came to Los Angeles, because I kind of just stumbled into it. And the context in which I found myself reflecting on Los Angeles was, I thought it'd be best if we first understand how different Los Angeles is from other cities, because it's profoundly different. And it turns out that that's why so many people hated it, because it didn't fit the model. And so I found myself looking back at utopias, because I kind of feel that way. And which button do I push? Ah, I got it, okay. So there are lots and lots of kind of centralized ideas for cities, stemming from the walls of medieval cities. And as time went through, this sort of tribal idea of a city as a single, unified, centralized district began to take precedence over any more thoughtful kind of city organization, all the way up through Ebenezer Howard and the ideal city here in the US, to symbols of centrality in cities, even if the city had no center. So the medieval city, as a collection, was nevertheless focused on a center. And today we have, of course, the Burning Man out in the desert. And I think it reflects a kind of cult-like idea of a city, that a city should be one thing, devoted to one kind of activity, and geometrically accessible in a kind of centralized way, which puts all the emphasis in a single point. Now, a lot of that in the 19th century came from power sources. Here you see a picture of an old knitting mill powered by a river. So you had to be near a river in order to get power for your factories. But then as time went on, things became sort of retrofitted. We got cities that were a kind of strange hybrid of, you know, modernity and antiquity, and all kind of blended together in something which was not particularly functional, but which nevertheless kind of hobbled on and got you through the day. Then in the early 20th century, all kinds of more magical cities began to evolve, because suddenly there was a new technology. There were telegraphs, there were airplanes, there were automobiles, and so there was a lot of speculative work going on to imagine cities which are really big analog mechanisms that devote an awful lot of energy to infrastructure and to things which will kind of allow you to transport yourself physically through space. And that's this little Life magazine ad represents a turning point in a way, because it used to be that if you were a salesperson, you would get on a train, you would arrive at the company that you wanted to sell something to, and you would wait in the lobby, perhaps for days. There was no way to make a real, solid, advanced connection. With the advent of the telephone, everything changed. You could phone ahead, and you could be there on time. And it's about the same time that Corbusier began thinking of his grand city visions, and Frank Lloyd Wright with Broadacre City, and of course Norman Bell Geddes, who is my personal hero, with the kind of stitching together of the entire United States with a vast superhighway system, which of course in turn spawned an entirely new kind of business. And I think this kind of business is one of the archetypal businesses which fueled Los Angeles and the reality of Los Angeles. The fact that a single business could have multiple locations, can you imagine how radical that was? That was an incredibly, incredibly radical idea. And so as the city began to be populated by these things and by connective tissue, the entire nature of the city changed. Vaulting ahead, Ridley Scott looks at Blade Runner. Our friend Pedro Almodovar looks at a city with flying cars, almost no infrastructure. And so we're bit by bit leeching away the infrastructure of the city. The vision of the city as a kind of unified centrality just vaporizes. So Tom Main, with his proposal for the western half of Manhattan, abandons that, and we're getting closer and closer and closer to be in a 100% cybernetic environment, where the physical environment is accompanying it and supporting it, but no longer primary in our pursuits. So why LA was a thing that I just began thinking about because of your invitation, Wim. Because it is an anomaly in the way that cities organize themselves. It has things which cities in general have not had. It's changing all the time. It doesn't stay the same geographically in terms of its, the locations which we think of as hip or cool. Mm-hmm. It's full of incongruities and inconsistencies, which, if I look at it visually, are somewhat disturbing perhaps, but which lend vitality to the entire city. And it's also extremely useful as a tool. I think my model of Los Angeles is it's a tool that I can use and exploit to achieve different ends. So I'll just go quickly through some of this. Mm-hmm. It's for a long, long time been a center of technological innovation. This is the very first air show in the world, which is right here. The changes, I just chose Santa Monica as a place which went through profound changes in terms of its kind of ability to reinvent itself. And I don't know how many of you know, but when Santa Monica and Kenny first began, and with Venice, California, it was an entertainment center. And people would come out there to disport themselves. It was like a Coney Island of the West. And then shortly thereafter, they discovered oil. All of that went away. It became a field of oil wells. This is the same Santa Monica beach that we know today. Orson Welles filmed Touch of Evil there, transforming it into that, and you may remember the final sequence takes place in an oil field, which is the oil field which was immediately next door to Main Street in Venice. Mm-hmm. And then Venice goes on to become this luxurious elite estate. And those transformations all took place in less than 100 years. And there's not another city in the world in which something transposed itself so rapidly and with such elan. My model, and the one that I continue to think about as the city as a tool, is a motion picture backlot. It's where everything is accessible on a moment's notice with a minimum of bureaucratic red tape, so that if you need something fabricated, if you need something written, if you need an accountant or a lawyer, it's immediately available. It's like a toolbox. And the incongruities that you find in a toolbox are exactly of the same nature that you find in Los Angeles. The franchises mix in with the institutions almost seamlessly. And on reflection, it actually starts to look like these crazy things that Piranesi did. And like right? It really does. It starts to look like an assemblage of fragments of some greater whole, which are glued together, mostly through people's self-consciousness. It goes from bling bling to expensive watches, side by side. they coexist quite comfortably. It goes from elite housing to dingbats. It goes from hot rods to amorphous shapes. So the thing that is attractive to me about Los Angeles as a city is its variability. The number, I was talking with Neil the other day about my advocacy for enclaves, and that rather than thinking of a city as a whole entity of a unified sort and a unified texture, that the nature of LA as a home to robust communities of many, many, many different varieties, I think is central to its being. It's kind of like a brain that's full of all kinds of different things. They're squashed together. Their sensibilities permeate through the body, and circuitry glues them all together and smears the reality into something that adheres because of the blurred edges. There's almost no division between Burbank, Glendale, Los Angeles, except for people water their lawns a little more one place or another. So in a way, we're really all communicating on an individual basis with this vast, vast infrastructure which continues to feed us information and joy and pleasure. It's like a three-dimensional Brownian motion. So I took the time to dig up a few images on Google Maps, which is pretty incredible, of the different places and ethnic enclaves that we've got in Los Angeles. We have Korean districts, very vital. We have Boys Town, West Hollywood, which is extraordinary. We have, I forget where this is. Oh, this is in Boyles Heights, very strong Latino community. We have Monterey Park, really strong Chinese community. We have, this is little
Ethiopia.
Little Ethiopia, you're right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And there's a little no, that's little Bangladesh. Sorry, that's little Bangladesh.
What a mistake.
The next one is little Ethiopia. This is little Ethiopia. And this is Rodeo Drive. And this is Little Saigon. Oh no, this is Thai Town. That's Thai Town, and this is Little Saigon. And so the point being that these enclaves have enormous vivacity. They are very, very powerful. They are very distinct from one another. This is Ventura Boulevard. And each one has its own almost neighborhood quality. And so I wish to applaud LA on that basis. And that's frankly what keeps me here. We based a little model on, I'll just zoom, I'm finished.
Okay.
Because we did a little cartoon strip, Ming and I, dealing with what might be a series of enclaves, and I know I've gone on too long.
No.
So, no.
It's great, but I am happy that I made you think about why you came to LA. You told us about it in a very poetic and visually very stimulating way, and we'll continue more about it in our conversation. We're now going on to, is Peter's, are you set up? Is it set up for you?
I underestimated the traffic in Los Angeles. So,
well, maybe we go to...
no, I can also, I prepared a little introduction, but we can also make it, put it upside down. This is like...
well, Heather, are we ready for... Otherwise, why don't we otherwise first go to Hitoshi?
I also can talk without the...
Okay, why don't you start the talk and... Oh.
Yeah. Or you can, or I can also use your images. Yeah. So I think that Greg, he answered the question. There's nothing more to say. It's also kind of a love affair you are in, as far as I understood. And for me, I mean, it is easier. It's easier. Why? And I would say, why not? Why not Los Angeles? But because this has to do with the relation or with where I'm coming from Vienna. It's the most conservative, narrow backward city in the world. Yeah, so Los Angeles has a space for contemporary, and this is what attracted me before I have been here. And it was especially the work, to be honest, of Morphosis and Eric Moss. When they started, there was not so much to see, but this was not possible to imagine in Vienna. This was like in the beginning of the 90s, was a little bit before the earthquake, and I just came here for seeing that. Just this, it was a very radical idea how to also to leave the modern movement. No, in Vienna it was the war, so this is not even it's not even the modern movement touched Vienna. I mean, you have a very beautiful history of architecture, but there is not such which is now contemporary in a scale which would change or would change a little bit the city or would remain. That there are human beings here which are born now, which live now, which are breathe now, we are thinking now. This is not possible. It's not there. It is absolutely, from my understanding, Vienna never reach contemporary. This is absolutely impossible. And Los Angeles is a way out. Is a way out. And then this was, for me, it was very spontaneous. To come here, and I can also tell the story how did it come together. I absolutely don't believe on concepts, not on any concept, because I think concept is something is always backwards. No? You have to make a declaration, but that if you're able to make a declaration, then you can only act from your experience. And this is the opposite of an experiment. So that's another case, but I think it's so contradictory, Los Angeles. And then that it has this spirit, this chance, and this kind of power. And then, of course, if you look, but this was not my point of departure, but if you look at the tradition, there's a tradition, axis, Vienna, Los Angeles. I mean, the greatest brain of Austria came to Los Angeles or had to come to Los Angeles. There is no Jewish community anymore in Vienna. This is one of the reasons. This was the bourgeois who really had culture. There is no culture now because there's a government, there's an official, and there's nobody, there's no individual person who are really interested in art or in culture. If, then that what they produced 100 years ago, but nothing contemporary. And I think I'm not the only one. This is something, and also the people from Billy Wilder film, like Schindler, he came here, but he never went back. No? So this is also, it's an interesting point, why he never went back, so I not even can tell you the reason. Or Richard Neuter. That means, and then we can try to analyze which there is no answer in the end, but would they have been successful in Vienna? I think as a question, it's an interesting question. Richard Neuter or Rudolf Schindler. And I mean, I have ideas on this question, but I don't want to answer it. It also doesn't make any sense to answer. I think a question is always more important as the answer. No? So more I can't say at the minute, at the moment.
Well, I think it's wonderful that you came to Los Angeles to see the work of a Viennese architect. I think that's really very good.
That's not what he said, though.
He said he came to see Koop Himmelblauw.
No. I think you said Morphosis and Eric Moss. This was the only one which interested me at this time, to be honest. Even if I make now enemies, but I have enough enemies. So
okay. Well, then we go on to Hitoshi.
Okay. I hope you can find my presentation, but as you can see, I'm Japanese, and I still feel I'm Japanese rather than Los Angelino. And I guess I'm going to a little bit talk about my personal kind of experience and my maybe very personal view about LA and maybe a little bit about what we are doing at UCLA.
I think it's this one that we just got a new one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No, this is not the one. Where's my... Sorry, this is not... This is okay as a promotion, but which one? This is the one. Okay.
Okay.
So we have to go back.
Okay.
Okay, so I came here for the first time was 1987 as a student at SciArc. And I have to say, I didn't really think if LA is perfect for me or anything. It was completely accidental. And then after that, I worked for Wolfpricks in LA for almost like 5 years. So my initial stay here was 5 years and a half, probably. Then I went back to Japan. So this is my second stay. And I came back here 2007 to serve as a chair at the Department of Architecture at UCLA. Then now 6.5 years. So the total of 12 years in LA. So that's maybe quarter of my life in LA. And then 3/4 I was in Japan. So then this is actually the photograph of the Railroad House in Palm Springs. And this is a photograph of my 50th year birthday that I did. Then when I was sitting there, and I called my father, and then in Japan, then all of a sudden that I realized, oh my God, actually this is a house that actually I encountered with my father when I was really small in the movie. And I realized that, oh my God, that's my first experience of LA. I'm the guy from northern part of Japan, and even though LA is the closest foreign country for Japanese, but still, I say the culture I grown up in the 70s are really different from the one you have here. I mean, I ate the first real ham when I was like 10 years old. The ham I used to eat before that was made out of fish. So you can tell, actually, it was really different culture. Then my father somehow decided to take me to the movie theater when I was 10 for the first time to watch this 007 movie. I don't know what he was thinking because it's not really appropriate to take 10 years old to the 007 movie, but I was like totally fascinated by watching this, Diamond Forever. And there's a many scene, and then this house was used for that. So I was like, all of a sudden kind of, how to say that, oh yeah, this is actually the lens for me to look at LA through this experience. So it's very subjective, and of course, I really appreciate all this kind of a logical understanding of LA, but beyond that, as a foreigner, that the first image of LA, which still kind of dictated myself, is this image that I saw. And what it was actually, it was an incredible sort of optimistic attitude towards the future through technology. If you remember, this house is already like that. There's a big rock inside, and then there's a female assassin trying to kill 007. And of course, he'll never be defeated. And then there's a bad guy with a white cat, and then with an incredible technology to actually conquer the world. Then I thought it's really interesting to see this incredible optimistic attitude toward the future. Again, through the technology, like he wants to conquer the world by putting diamonds in a satellite to create the mass destruction. That actually embedded in my mind. And then when I came to LA, of course, then there are many people like that. Howard Hughes. He created the largest airplane by combining the ship technology and airplane technology back in the 40s. He also created this gigantic sort of warehouse, right, to build it. And to me, of course, there's a lots of interesting sort of places and new ideas about the city. But again, this interesting attitude of sort of use of technology and make it, try it. And sometimes this is the largest failure in the history of airplane, actually, right? But still, this kind of optimism is just keep pushing everything. And I thought that's LA to me. And that's what I really like about LA. And that's why probably I'm here. So we are trying something like that at UCLA in the same location that that man tried to conquer the world with this big airplane and with these friends. So we are trying to create actually the platform to collaborate with the industry and then these people and students, and still, amazingly enough, that it happens. I never thought it's going to happen, but there's energy to push such things here, and I think that's why I'm here.
Fantastic.
Sorry. This isn't that advertisement, okay? That's it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. That's very helpful. So last speaker, Neil.
Sure. Should I use the black one?
I think so. That's the one that seems to work.
You know, I have a great affinity with all the sort of emigre stories that these guys have told. And for me, the most important thing to convey to you is I didn't set foot in LA till I was 30. So from 0 to 30, there's a lot of mythology about what a city is. So this is a very, very short, compressed story about mythologies and realities, and this is the beginning. 1983, I just moved to New York. I had been there a couple months, saw a competition to do a concept project to design a regional house. And I'd never been to LA and decided to choose LA as the site. And more specifically, I chose the 10 freeway, not near the 10 freeway, but actually on the 10 freeway. This was a 200-foot tall house built in the median with your own private sort of driveway that was a on and off ramp. There it is in the site plan, 200 feet tall, all these different rooms and activities. You know, I don't think I'd really even seen a palm tree, believe it or not, in my life. And I painstakingly drew these palm trees because that was a definite icon of what did it mean to be not where I was. And yet here in this set of images, it was drawn in the New York world of chiaroscuro, of grays and blacks. Color hadn't yet become a part of the project. The story really begins, and it's a common story, begins 20 years before. My family had 2 weeks vacation every year. One day, 8 years old, I get the guts in the spring of 1963. I go in and I demand to my parents that instead of going to Boston, New York, Montreal, or Chicago, that we go west and we go to Disneyland. And I thought this is really the thing to do. I'd already seen like every Winslow Homer painting he ever painted. I've been to every museum on the East Coast. I knew every portrait by John Singer Sargent, and I loved it, by the way. I loved all of that, but I wanted to see the Matterhorn. And the answer was pretty much, are you kidding me? I was a victim of birth order. I was told that my brother and sister got to go, they're older than me, and my parents weren't inclined to take this trip ever again. So the West Coast and Utopia would have to wait. I could live in the mythology, though, just like Hitoshi. I could live in mythology. In the 1960s, these kinds of ads for Fords, you'd find them in Look magazine or Life magazine, and this is the media, no internet. So the fantasy for everybody, probably I'm in Texas, it's a landlocked world. We don't have water. The kids don't look like that. There are no surfboards. Nobody could afford a Mustang, and you know, rock and roll wasn't hot. So LA, in many cases, refers to what Wim was talking about, which is it has lots of things that you don't have if you're coming from a particular place. So I could live on through the media. So I saw these advertisements, Fender guitars, designed and innovated here in California, and these kinds of images, you know, what kid wouldn't want to be strolling down the street, rolling down the street, playing a Fender Stratocaster in a brand new suburb, or a little bit older in a Porsche 911? This is what one could aspire to. I became really, really obsessed with surf music, and in particular this guitar. It's a Mosrite guitar, designed and built in California. Now, I'm in New York at the time, and the first time I saw the Ramones and I saw Johnny Ramone plays a Mosrite guitar, it made a lot of sense to me. You could take a surf guitar and make it into a punk rock guitar, so I went and bought one. And this guitar was like a kind of an icon or a totem pole in my little crappy, too expensive, windowless apartment in Manhattan. And this was really, I was going to get to New York to LA on the back of this guitar. And still today, when my family leaves, my wife and daughter leave, I turn this on to 10. And it's the real connection I have to what does it mean to live this rock and roll lifestyle. You can tell because of the awesome rock stance that I've got going on there. Pretty lame, I know. I grew up a Lakers fan, actually. Another thing we didn't have was NBA basketball. Here we are in landlocked Texas. I love sports. Jerry West was an amazing icon. Every year, you know, I just pleaded with them to win the title. I hated the Celtics. I hated the Knicks, and they always lost. But it was part of figures and people and mythologies. I could only get this once a week or so on television. Here's Brian Wilson, the guy who invented surf music, basically. Brian Wilson never surfed. He wrote about surfing. He kind of went crazy, and so this was a little bit later on a way for me to start understanding that all of that advertising mythology was just what it was. It was real, but it was also propagated at the same time. Brian Wilson kind of dropped out. He couldn't even perform anymore. He wore bathrobes almost all the time. He was not the healthiest of guys, but he opened a health food store. So this weird collision between LA is not exactly what you think it is, was the beginning, I think, of understanding reality and mythology, even still from afar. This healthy idea and the idea of a utopia and a dystopia kind of coming together is something that was really fascinating for me. So we get to the Watts Riots. I see this on television, 10, 11 years old, don't quite know what all the issues are, but these images are projected into every living room all across the city, all across the world. And wow, it's happening there. And so the pictures of this sort of fantasy, this sort of sun-bleached world, of course, were completely corroded by racial tension of incredible, very, very short but epic proportions. We all know it. A few years later, Bobby Kennedy in the Ambassador Hotel, another kind of weird stain on the city. LA becomes hell-a. LA becomes a world where strange things happen. The difficult happens, cataclysms happen. This was all real, and I don't want to say that the projected mythologies weren't real, because at some level they are. So LA becomes a sunshine and noir kind of thing, even from afar. And as soon as my parents rejected the Disneyland trip, of course, I'm coming not just to visit, but I'm coming to live. I came to LA for the landscape. That was one big reason. I'm going to show you a series of photographs I've taken over the last 6 or 7 years of the LA landscape. I came to LA for the desert. I lived in New York. It was claustrophobic. I loved it. It was intense. It was the greatest 5 years of my youth in a way. But as Jean Baudrillard said about the desert, time stands still. Nothing happens. You can reinvent it all the time. It's the purest example of the conceptual emptiness, theoretically, that's in LA. You could be who you wanted to be. I came to LA for the Valley. These are photographs I've taken in helicopter rides with Benny Chan, the photographer. We go up every now and then, once or twice a year. And I like to photograph the city from this particular view and understand it actually through images that are kind of epical and mythological in themselves. As Craig said, this is a city without form, and Manhattan had been a city all about form, and I wanted something that could be recreated over and over and over again in an endless world. I came for these strange juxtapositions in Wilmington, exotic neighborhoods next to factories, things that you'd never find through logical planning, but through sort of the evolution of the development of the landscape. So the landscape itself, in its open-endedness, its kind of sublime nature, its level of challenge and difficulty, its strange and dark beauty was very, very much a reason why I came here. One of the first places I drove to when I moved here in 1988, absolutely made a beeline for it, the Irwindale gravel pits. Some of the biggest holes that you've ever seen extracted over 40 and 50 years of time. What will happen with these sites? A city with holes in it? Who'd have thought? Really, really crazy. This is the 60 freeway that I photographed a couple of years ago when the bridge broke. So we all know these images. We all know this world. You don't have to see these images. They exist in your head, in my head, and that's the thing I love about LA, and I think Peter put a finger on it too. You get to kind of think it and make it experimental all the time. I also came for the people in LA. I'm not sure I ever met anybody like this. Does anybody know anybody who looks like this? I certainly don't. But people are really important. And so there's, people on the beach, but the people that I really came to see on the beach were these guys. So I came for the same reason. I came for the architects. Love them, hate them, but you got to deal with them. And these were the ones that we knew, as young architects. There's no women, there are no Mustangs, there are no surfboards, there's not even that much sun. So reality starts to set in, and architects hatching plans to take the world over. Tom and Michael's Venice 3 house was a real transformative thing. There are the palm trees that I drew in New York 3 years before. They became a reality for me. And so this level of DIY experimentation was just so powerful, and I came for the same reasons, to be a part of this scene, to be a part of what Craig and Ming were doing, and so forth, to just be one element in that conversation. Today, living in LA is part of a global world, of course, and we do things locally, and we've been talking, or you've been talking about reality at all levels. LA at the center point, LAX to London Heathrow, 11 hours. LAX to Tokyo Narita, 11 hours. LAX to Santiago, Chile, 11 hours, all different directions. And Santa Monica to downtown, 11 hours. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Not contempt, it's just all relative.
Oh, yeah. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much for these very different interpretations, but there are some common threads about the popular culture that you're all aware of, the technology, the media, that all helped you in your thinking before coming to LA, and prepared you for being here once you were here and already being able to like it when you arrived. So I'm now going to talk to you about a number of different themes. And the first one I would like to talk about is straddling culture. So we've all come from different places, come to LA, and two cases come from a different country, but also from a different city to coming to LA, and there are differences in what you did in one city or one country and how you do things here. And I would like to know a little bit, first of all, starting with Hitoshi and Peter, about what it was to come from Japan and from Austria to LA. Peter said already a few things about why he could not, why he had to get out of Vienna once in a while. What is it that you found here, and how difficult was it to adjust to it, or not difficult? And if you could talk a little bit about that. Hitoshi, if we start with you, about if you could compare architectural practices in Japan and here, and how that all is different, and do you try to straddle both and combine them somehow, merge them in your work.
So I should start?
Yeah, why don't you start?
About the practice. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
and about from going from one culture to the next one and what it means in your specific field.
Since I took over UCLA, right, I forgot about practice, but yes. I mentioned about this kind of a great possibility to try, and I mean, lots of like new stuff through technology and so on, and I'm fascinated about that you can maybe pursue your own sort of utopia through this kind of things, and there's still always the possibility. But in terms of practice, maybe right now the LA has a little difficult situation in comparison to Japan. Still in Japan, the small practice, I mean, is open to the young practitioner, and then they can build, and then maybe they make a mistake or they go too crazy, and then the good thing is in Japan, maybe the house meant to last 20 years, so it's okay. Mm-hmm. But here, I see many struggle with the young people that actually not being able to find the chance. So I don't know, I mean, probably 20 years ago, the situation has been very different when during 80s. But because I see so many interesting sort of try by young practitioner, 80s. Morphosis, Eric, and you, and so on. So I don't know what has shifted in the past 10 years, but if you ask me to compare directly with Japan, I think in terms of practice, there's more you can try there than here at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's true.
And did you already feel that also when you went back? You had already worked here in Los Angeles, then you went back. Was that... Were you then aware of that transition and of that change, and that you felt like, yes, things are easier here? Of course, you did not have your own office at that time, but you did work in an architectural practice. So.
I mean, again, I didn't think when I moved back or when I came back, right? So it's completely accidental. The reason why I went back to Japan is because I won a big competition. Uh-huh. So I had to build a big stadium. So I had no choice, I guess. Uh-huh. So I went back there, and then when I came back here, I was very much interested in American academia and how to run the institution, mm-hmm. And also maybe there's an interesting opportunity to expand the way the field that you. So again, nothing very exciting here in this decision.
No, but, it just reminded me of something that Christopher Hawthorne said this morning, that LA, from the New York perspective, LA used to be the place where you could get things built. If you wanted to have things built as a New York architect, you would do it in LA, not in New York. And he said, this has changed completely. Now it is so difficult to build in Los Angeles. And Craig and Neil also join in this conversation.
But I still have to say, though, still the lens I wore when I was 10 through this movie is here. So that means still I see lots of possibilities, and I kind of hope. That's kind of weird that still I see that.
I think it's a double-edged sword, because what is so attractive is the idea of possibilities and the idea of expanding ideas and a kind of visionary kind of quality that the city has. And of course that's front and center in the motion picture industry, et cetera. But that openness also reflects that there's not a strong institutional matrix which disciplines and holds everything together and doesn't and channels the effort in a particular way. In LA, things are very diffuse. Mm-hmm. And architecture, unlike many of the other arts, needs a very, very steady constituency that's really, really pushing for it. And I think the openness of LA mitigates against that. I think we don't have a Museum of Modern Art that's kind of, the gatekeeper. Mm-hmm. We don't have a gatekeeper. We don't, and so I think that gives people less sense of confidence as a client, less sense of direction, less sense of momentum, and and essentially makes it extremely difficult for young architects who are just starting out because there's nobody there to kind of give them a foundation.
Do you think of that?
Well, I think that the idea of being here and working off of possibilities, whether it's a mythology or a reality, is interesting. And I'm often asked, since you don't get to build in LA much, couldn't you, just as well live someplace else? And I always say no. Because conceiving of the work here, even though it's a global world, is super important, even if you can't put your finger on it. Even if it's just an ambient environmental issue of how you live day to day or who it is you talk to or so there's a gravity here, that's brought you guys here far away, brought us here and keeps us here. And that's the part that if anybody had contempt for LA, you'd have to get their comeuppance at that level like you're here, right?
Could
There's
you
a
define
gravity
that
there.
gravity a little bit further? It's what you showed in your image, but I think it's more than that. Could you define a little bit more what this gravity is?
Yes, well, I think that in the relation to what I showed, environment, physical environment, if I had accepted a professorship in Graz, for instance, in 1996, I'm sure how I think and what my work would be quite a bit different. I was quite fearful, and I didn't get offered the job, but I thought, how will my mind change, living in this particular place? Oddly enough, a reverse engineered possible immigration the other way. So the gravity has to do with culture, with possibilities, and I think, remake that, and it becomes I would say a force rather than a weight, a force rather than a ballast or a drag, because we can go wherever we want and, in theory, affect other places, not wherever we can want, but we get opportunities to do that. Craig and Ming built a high-rise in Shinjuku, and it goes on from there. So.
And so, Peter, when you talked earlier, it was very much reminded of similar things that Wolf Prix of Himmelblau always says, that the bureaucracy in Vienna is too stifling. It's hard to work there, and he always felt this freedom here in LA when he worked here. But could you talk a little bit more about what it was for you then to find this environment here and to set up your the Max Center, and what that means also within a Viennese context?
No, I don't want to go too much at the Viennese because that's become very boring. I think things are changing. Also, Los Angeles is not anymore, or it's different like it was 20 years ago. There's no question about. And now, if it's also a very interesting point, if now we here in Los Angeles reflect, the people are all on life and reflecting what they have done 20 years ago. This is a kind of, maybe there's too much Vienna, Los Angeles access and an influence from Vienna, because there is not so much reason to celebrate people which are they are still working, still attacking the architecture, and still radical. So I think it's makes sense maybe, but you can question that. No, you can question that. How important is it, or would it be more interesting to put more energy in what you mentioned? What is with the young people or whatever? No, and I think this, like in architecture, the schools they're really still on the international level. They're very important schools in Los Angeles for architecture, also for art. And for my understanding, it is, and when you say Wolf, I mean, I don't want to, he speaks for himself, but I think it's this kind of optimistic, it's still an optimistic spirit in the city, and this puts out, I think, energy in a different direction. And this was, for me, to be honest, I it's very simple and kind of naive also. But I had to go out from Vienna because I understood if either I leave Vienna or I try to find a kind of a dialogue. And this I couldn't tell exactly, but Los Angeles was in the end, it attracted me for this kind of reason. And if you all show what you can show this in all details, but on top of this, I believe it's a city, maybe also this different cultures which are very close together, and also the structure. It's not a city. I mean, this is something. It's a place here,
yeah,
no?
it's a place.
And it's not this, and it's not urban in the sense like New York or Beijing or other cities. But still, I think it's a challenge in many things. Many things are happened here, are still happening here, and I mean, I would like just to explain a little bit what I have in mind. The introduction, my introduction, before we finish the discussion, if there is a chance.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to follow up on what both you and Neil were saying about this optimism, because I think what goes along with the optimism is a real appetite for risk. I think people are attracted here whose DNA kind of gives them an appetite for risk. I think that cuts across all categories, whether you're an entrepreneur trying to start a fashion company or an eyeglass manufacturer. Look at the startup of LAI Works. It's a place in which people, I think, feel they'll have a soft landing. It's non-judgmental in that sense. If you want to initiate something and you have a vision, this is the place to do it, I think. Partly because it's less judgmental, there are less restrictions. And so I think for...
Yeah, but on the other hand, LA has the bad and the good side. No? So
that has the bad
we
side
can't
too.
just put it as something that special. No? So it's not heaven here, but I think that there are many incredencies which in relation, especially in relation to Europe, no? Because and New York is, of course, it's where the European meets, no? So
Yes.
it's a very European city in one hand, and LA is, of course, it's more independent from all these influences. That's maybe the case.
But it's not the model for other cities, which is kind of curious to me, because you would think that as a kind of successful model, that it would have, it would begin to influence patterns in other cities around the world.
Yeah, but why should it be a model? I mean, I think the structure of the city, it's, I really underestimated the power of the traffic today, but it sucks your energy, your time. I mean, this is a structure which doesn't make, it's absolutely senseless, no? And nobody tried to find really an idea to implant a system, maybe an individual new system, traffic system, because this is it's absolutely ridiculous. Also, how much time, and if you, like me, not knowing which time you can go in the car, because this was the worst time, so I should already, this is the 11 hours, which I was now 11 hours in the car to come here. No? Yeah. So I think this is this kind of contradiction. There's nothing perfect here. But that's also the interesting thing, because this kind of perfection in the wrong direction is a problem. No? And here you can't, like in Europe, of course, there's a lot of energy to make things beautiful in the outside. There is no time here, and maybe also not money to really celebrate the tradition, no? I mean, it's the opposite. It says,
I think it is.
Good and bad sides, but I think it's more open. That's what you say. You can people look and listen if you're doing something new, different. Like I think where I'm coming from.
Yeah, actually, this optimism, I really I'm not sure if this is optimism because of LA or it's a more American thing. Right?
It's not an American.
It's not an American thing.
In the 50s it was.
Okay, so...
No, I would say optimism is an American thing.
What happened after the 50s?
Yeah. We shouldn't start to be too local LA, no?
No,
because I think this is not to give up is an American idea, no? And maybe here you have it's a different structure and a different atmosphere.
Well, to underscore a little bit of that, like the Detroit automobile manufacturers have almost all, in fact, global auto manufacturers have all located their design studios in Los Angeles. And I think one of the reasons why is because their designers are inspired by the lifestyle and the context of the city. And there's a famous story about Honda going to Disneyland and studying how people load their equipment into their cars as they're in the big Disneyland parking lot, which they use then to inform them how to design their cars for an American audience. I think there is an experimental lifestyle. People are far more...
That's what I wanted to say.
Yeah?
Yeah. There must be something about lifestyle that
I
car
think
sellers think that this is what life in Los Angeles is sort of like the ideal, from the outside, the ideal life that we want to present to the rest of the world.
Yeah, Lindsay Lohan aside. Right?
Yeah, okay. Yeah. But I also would like to change the conversation a little bit and talk also about the influence of LA's avant-garde. Was that for all of you, I think for Peter must have been, because you came here to deal with the Schindler avant-garde, but how much did this play a role in your decision to, I'm getting a message there, but okay.
What's the message?
Yeah, okay. But I'm going to finish this. I see what you say, okay. Yeah, okay.
Quick.
Q&A.
So, for example, Neil, you said in your presentation that very soon after you arrived, you had gone to this big pit to look at it, and also I've read in other things that you've said, like literally the first thing that you did when you came to LA was go to see Watts Towers and go to Burbank. You did not say, I went to see Noever's Level House or Schindler's Level Beach House. Was that conscious, or you were those architects did not really were not very important for you, or?
Yeah, I think quite honestly, the residue of all the mythology and the events, of course, over all of this time was the real pent-up curiosity that I had. And Wim was, we were talking some time ago, and I said the first time I visited LA, age 30. Drove from the airport to Watts Towers because I was not only the Watts Towers, but I wanted to see where all this tumultuous world came from. And it was only at the end of this 3-day trip that I managed to drive by, Kings Road, and so the architectural impression that I had really was the contemporary one. What Tom and Michael were doing at Morphosis, and what Eric was doing, and this was as close as you could get to the now. And even Frank Lloyd Wright and Schindler were historical, at some particular level. And it was all about the now, and my early conversations with people at SCI-Arc were about that. And it was very important to understand the minute-to-minute nature of Los Angeles rather than the 20th century evolution of it in a way.
Even though you didn't want to talk anymore about Vienna, I do want to end this with asking you one question with regards to
my introduction?
LA. Your introduction. Let me first ask this question, and then we go into question and answer. And in the meantime, somebody can set up your thing. But you came here to deal with LA's avant-garde. How did you sell to a minister of culture in Vienna? Like, I'm going to have a branch of my museum in Los Angeles, and then that's in a relatively small house.
No, I mean, this was, of course, first of all, they didn't like it. They did everything not to do it. And I remember there was a high, from the ministry, the highest of the administration, not the minister, brought him here. And I was negotiating more than a year to buy one of the Schindlerhaus, and nobody wanted, but then they want to get rid of me and of these conferences, so they let, in the end, they let it be. But this guy, he came here, was one of the highest bureaucrats, and then we made a party for him at the Schindlerhaus, and then he looked at the house and said, you really brought us here all over the ocean to look at this hut, no? And, so he was absolutely disappointed and was also very angry to come here for just... but this can be everywhere, no? But I still... it's also not how you make things in the end of the day, but I think the most important is that we not just made the Schindlerhaus, or now there are 3 Schindlerhauses, made a house museum. This was not from the beginning. We tried to understand Rudolf Schindler as a challenge, no? And he was like in between art and architecture. So one of the very few architects, no? Because architecture, from my understanding, is of course not art, because as an architect you need a client, as an artist you are your own client. So this is the big difference between art and architecture. But I think this dialogue it's very healthy, very important, and this was also the reason why we, in this residency program, which is I think still very successful, put young people, artists and architects in a kind of relation, in a kind of a dialogue. And the idea was, I think it was for Vienna maybe more important to have this branch here, because also my understanding became completely different. And I think this is this output of Los Angeles, and this was for... But Vienna is very ignorant, no? They still like to ignore things, but this was also the people. We changed the people. There were a lot of people from Los Angeles we invited, and the other way around.
Great. So while we have 1 or 2 questions, I want to ask, is Peter Noever's, it's not working? Okay, it's not going to work. So why don't we then ask 1 or 2 questions?
No, I mean,
are there questions in the audience? Okay. Oh, okay. Well, they cannot. Our technician cannot make it work. So that's
can I see the technician?
Okay. So why don't you go over there? And in the meantime, maybe there's another question.
Yes. Hello. Going back to the concept of empty space in LA, especially versus a city like New York, as a city is filled up with streets and urban businesses such as McDonald's and the repetition of neighborhoods, even though there's a diversity and a difference in neighborhoods, how can architecture kind of almost connect the dots in that empty space? I almost call it empty space now in the sense of strip malls, and there is a diversity and unique aspect of different regions, but there is a empty space that's not desert. I'll call the strip mall aspect of LA the desert now. So how can an architect look at that existing landscape and say, you know, how can we really take, because when you go to also, not only from a beauty standpoint, but also if you go to New York or San Francisco, with the advent of iPads and as technology evolves, those cities right now are getting a big leap, especially on a youthful level, because technology is really available to somebody on their feet. People want to use it. We're sitting in our cars. We want to do things. We don't want to just sit in our cars. So how can you use that empty space to advance the visual of our landscape, and also maybe appeal to technological advances such as, you know, Google Car, for example, I see as something as the future for LA, but I just wanted to ask that question.
I'm probably going to say a really nasty thing here, not about you, but the way I look at it, a strip mall is a fantastic incubator for individuals to kind of start a mom and pop shop. It's by its nature scruffy. It's by its nature something is undercapitalized. It's by its nature something which is put together on a shoestring. However, the proliferation of those things is an indicator that there's a lot of energy and passion that people have when they open a donut shop or anything of that nature. And you won't find that in very many other cities. So the strip mall, you can stigmatize it from a design point of view. But I think as a functioning entity, it's a very powerful thing. We would feel immediately if they all disappeared, the city would sag to its knees. And I think one of the difficult things, most difficult things, is to balance one's sense of aesthetic coherence and reality with the energy of something that's still forming itself. I won't go into it.
Another question? There's a question here. Yeah.
Hi, this might be a question for an urban planner, but at the same time, I'm jumping off on the last question about empty spaces. Also, I think you raised history and also thinking about the future and the demographic shifts that are occurring. For example, I work with the school districts, and 80% of our kids have Spanish as their first language, but also how young our population is. So my question is, where are the architects in this dialogue? How are we going to connect the dots? We're not just, Los Angeles is very optimistic, but also very young. So I'm just wondering what the conversation is out in your profession about that, about the shifts that are occurring in Los Angeles. Demographic shifts and everything else.
Demographic shifts.
Presently, our office is working on you might not call it a renovation, but for the sake of argument, a middle school in Compton. Compton used to be an African-American neighborhood city. It's no longer. It's 95% Latino. And our budget is substantial enough to do something, but it's going to involve paint. And the conversations that we've had with kids, already about, their associations and meanings of iconography and color and so forth has been profound, on the one hand personally for our office to be able to, let's say, engage in questions that are about design. Shopping malls or strip malls, or you can debate it on the design. Shopping malls are really pretty much like plumbing. You need them.
Yeah, like plumbing.
Right? It's like water. It's sort of everywhere. And contemporary life and contemporary culture in Los Angeles, it does depend on the banal in a way, and yet we can become inured to that, especially in schools and especially kids and so forth. So I think every opportunity, and this is a rare one, for my office, because we typically bill for the 1% and can't apologize for it and seek things out, et cetera, et cetera. I do think that where design is in a big broad range. I mean, notwithstanding the Getty, I'd also just say probably most people think, the latest app is more important than the next museum. I say that just in terms of what is life about. It's placeless and it's about the effectiveness of immediacy and so forth. So I hope that architects are going to be talking to principles app designers, and a whole series of other people so that design can become instrumental as opposed to siloed and segregated and typically banal. So that may be an answer to the question of what can architecture do. It's really what can architects do. We know architecture can be beautiful. We know it can be great.
Let me just add one thing, that I think that lately we too much constrain ourselves, like within the kind of predetermined definition of the profession. I think that the architect could actually get out from there and then maybe do different things rather than the one that traditionally defined. We've been involved in Little Tokyo, and there's a huge demographic changes, especially the generation to the other. And there's a big struggle because it's represented by traditional Japanese identity, but which is a little bit now becoming sort of a niche. And then there's a large population of the younger Japanese American that wants to actually re-identify the area. And then we worked with them to do this kind of event called Little Tokyo Design Week. We activate the town through design, but it's like a more event. And then it's more like a design of the software than the actual hardware that stays there. So, you know, I'm not saying that we will do the sort of event coordinator, but on the other hand, that it's very risky for us to actually put ourselves into this kind of a definition by what's the AIA or whatever it is. You need to really look at the different type of architect. And LA is interesting because there's so much sort of possibility for architect to really redefine ourselves and expand our profession. And I'm very optimistic about that.
Well, thank you very much. I need to let you go, otherwise you're not going to be able to get out of the tram, down the tram and out of the gate. So thank you so much, and thanks to all our speakers. It was a very interesting conversation. Thank you.